If it's Friday, Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema announces she is quitting the Democratic Party to become a registered independent. What the Senate shakeup means for the balance of power in the Senate for 2023 and 2024 and for presidential politics. Plus, statewide crackdowns on TikTok. 5 states in the last week alone have announced a ban on government use of the popular social media app amid growing national security concerns about its Chinese ownership. And bracing for a surge on top of another surge, President Biden is asking Congress for billions of emergency dollars as border officials prepare to face another rise in migrant crossings when COVID restrictions expire in less than 2 weeks. Well, happy Friday and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. The Democratic Party's era of good feeling after winning Georgia's special election Tuesday, giving them an outright Senate majority, lasted all of about 2.5 days. Welcome to the cold water splash on your face. Today, Arizona Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema announced she is leaving the Democratic Party, officially becoming a registered independent. She said in a media blitz this morning that the two parties simply don't reflect Arizona's priorities, so she's going her own way.
My stand today is about joining the many Americans and lots of Arizonans, in fact, the majority of registered voters, who don't believe that any political party fits them perfectly. But Arizonans can expect me to go back to work and do what I've always done, which is put my head down and deliver results for our community.
Of course, this sentiment is not really that new for Sinema. When she ran for the Senate the first time on the campaign trail in 2018, she was a bit of an iconoclast. She was a former progressive activist, but would not refer to herself as a proud Democrat when asked.
Are you a Democrat?
I am.
Proud Democrat?
Oh my gosh, it's hard to say proud. I don't know that, I'm not sure that people are even proud of parties anymore because I feel like the parties are not doing a good job. So I would say that I'm a proud Arizonan.
Can't say she didn't campaign how she has acted in office. Sinema's decision has raised a number of thorny questions, though, for Democrats, both in Washington and in the key 2024 presidential battleground of Arizona. In the Senate, Sinema says she will not be caucusing with the Democratic Party, but actually she is, because she's also saying she plans to be keeping her committee assignments. So she effectively is still caucusing with the Democrats. She's voting with the Democrats on the decision of which party should organize the Senate. That's how she's keeping her subcommittee chairmanship. Either way, though, she's not imperiling the Democrats' Senate control. Republicans still only have 49 seats. Democrats will still have a 1-seat control on every committee. This is not a 50-50 Senate, no matter her party registration. Still, how her party navigates this situation, now that's going to be key with such thin margins in the chamber, and it raises a whole lot of questions for 2024. In fact, largely, this is not a 2023 issue for the Senate. This is a 2024 issue for a whole lot of folks. Sinema has remained mum about whether she's actually going to seek re-election. But the party switch certainly feels like a preemptive strike against an Arizona Democratic Party that's already censured her and was getting ready to support a primary challenge against her. Whether Sinema feels like she jumped or was pushed to do this, it is potentially a savvy move for her politically. Arizona is a state where independents have real political power. Check out this. In Maricopa County, the state's main population center, the largest and most important county in America, it contains the city of Phoenix. Republicans have a 9-point registration advantage. They had that registration advantage on Election Day this year. But in last month's statewide elections, Democrats like Katie Hobbs and Mark Kelly overcame that 9-point deficit because of their strength with independent voters in Maricopa County. Still, it remains to be seen whether Democrats in Arizona can stay united enough around a candidate that calls themselves an independent. Arizona Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego and Greg Stanton both are seen as potential 2024 Senate candidates. They've weighed in accusing Sinema of political expediency and of turning her backs on Arizonans. Now, if there's one thing Democrats everywhere, including Joe Biden, don't want, it's a divided Democratic Party in a battleground state like Arizona heading into 2024. Bottom line, one of the biggest questions now facing Democrats is how exactly are they going to handle Sinema's defection? What is Joe Biden going to do? Sahil Kapoor is on Capitol Hill for us. Monica Alba's outside the White House for those shockwaves. Sahil, I'm going to start with you. Look, This changes nothing in 2023. I think that everybody kind of knows. Her vote is as easy or as hard to get for Democrats and Chuck Schumer as an independent as it will be for a Democrat. But it does seem to change the calculus if you're, say, a Democratic senator who votes less with Joe Biden but has stayed a Democrat, while Kyrsten Sinema has not. What other things are you hearing on the Hill?
Well, Chuck, this is a mini earthquake for Washington, I would say. It's a much bigger earthquake for the Arizona Senate race in 2024. It could radically reshape the dynamics, as you've artfully pointed out in that intro for the 2024 race. But let's start with Washington. Sinema will, for all intents and purposes, still be a caucusing Democrat. She insists she won't be a caucusing Democrat because she doesn't attend caucus meetings, which she hasn't done in quite a while. She won't continue to do that. But, she gets her committee seats from the Democratic Party. And as you point out, that is how the Senate is organized. So that 51 to 49 balance looks likely to stay. And it's not as if Democrats had an easy time winning her vote when she was, caucusing with Democrats, or more technically a Democrat and party registration. A big question here in Washington is that, is she going to change her practices? Is she going to become an even more difficult vote to win? Because at the end of the day, she has been a reliable vote for President Biden's nominations. At the end of the day, she has been winnable for most pieces of legislation that Democrats have pursued, although she has insisted on shaping and crafting and cutting back on elements of it. So that's an unknown matter for the next year or two. If Sinema is going to change her stripes, maybe try to vote a little bit differently, maybe find opportunities to vote with Republicans more often to burnish these independent credentials. But it's really Arizona where this is a huge issue, Chuck, because if she does decide to run as an independent, and she's refusing to say whether she will, that could really complicate Democrats' path to holding that seat in 2024. They've been on a winning streak, 3 Senate races, 1 presidential race, and the formula has always been overwhelming Democratic turnout and support, double-digit lead among independents, and a small slice, 5, 6, 7% of Republicans.
Sale, we saw a very muted statement from Chuck Schumer trying to, say, remain calm, all is well, nothing to see here. But I'm curious, have we heard from Mark Kelly?
We have not heard from Mark Kelly, and Mark Kelly has he's tried to thread the needle, strike a balance between supporting Sinema in certain situations, such as when the Arizona Democratic Party censured her. He defended her, he praised her. He hasn't, taken the Ruben Gallego tack of aggressively criticizing her. But it's not as if Mark Kelly appeared on the campaign trail with Kyrsten Sinema. She's stayed away from these Democratic events. She has cut ties completely, I am told, with the Arizona Democratic Party, has no contact with them for months. They can't even reach her to know where she is in many occasions. They don't really know where she stands on the issue. So this is a messy divorce that's been long in the making between Kyrsten Sinema and the Democratic Party, and it looks like they just signed the papers this morning.
Yeah, are we sure it's a divorce, though? Of all cycles for her to be doing this, it's the cycle that has the 2 other independents who caucus with the Democrats. Angus King, right, where the Democratic Party comfortably does not recruit an actual Democrat to run. And, of course, in Vermont, and Bernie Sanders, where occasionally the party in Vermont will nominate somebody, but it doesn't matter. Sanders wins quite easily. Is the DSCC really going to have sort of a different way of handling her that they would Angus King?
That's going to be a challenging question now for the DSCC, in part, Chuck, because the 2024 map is so difficult for Democrats. They're defending 5 Senate seats in purple states, including Sinema in Arizona, as well as 3 Democratic incumbents in some pretty red states, if not very red states. So is the DSCC going to treat her as an incumbent? Are they going to, defend her like an incumbent? I have my doubts about that because unlike, Angus King and Bernie Sanders, who have, tried to stay in the good graces and good standing with Democrats, Sinema seems to be actively moving away from the party.
We shall see. All right, Sahil Kapoor. I always know it's Friday on Capitol Hill. I can hear way too many echoes. Way too many echoes, right, in your stand-up there. Sahil, it's good to see you. You're working on a Friday, even if the rest of Congress is trying not to. Let me move over to the White House, where we find Monica Alba. Monica, it's interesting. The White House has had this sort of I don't want to say love-hate relationship with Sinema, but on one hand, none of their bipartisan victories come without Kyrsten Sinema making them happen. At the same time, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris frequently talked about looking for 2 more Democratic votes in order to do things in the Senate, whether it's abortion rights or voting rights, pretty much a dig, not just at Joe Manchin, but at Kyrsten Sinema. How are they handling this today?
It's not love. It's not hate, Chuck. It's complicated. Okay, that is the relationship.
Is that
between
is that the status? Is that is that the Facebook status right now? It's complicated.
Absolutely, yes,
okay.
And that is a very official report that I'm giving to you. But no, seriously, the White House, after Georgia's results with Senator Warnock winning that seat again, they were talking about breathing room, feeling really good about that majority. And then with this news yesterday that we're told they did inform the White House in some manner. It's unclear whether the president actually spoke with Senator Sinema, but there was an awareness last night before this was public today that this was going to happen. They're saying, look, the breathing room, not so comfortable as it was maybe a couple of days ago. And that's because of something that the president always talked about in the last year and a half when these negotiations got complicated because of Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin. And that's because he would say, when the Senate is divided like this, you have 50 presidents. I'm not the only president. Everybody thinks they're their own president and can have their own control. So that is the important backdrop to all of this, while the White House maintains and wants to put out a projection of working with her and saying that they feel encouraged that on economic bills that she has supported in the past, like the manufacturing bill, or on infrastructure, they feel again that they can be able to continue to have that relationship. And because of Senator Warnock's victory, they'll still be enjoying the majority. But of course, it does give a little bit of a more outsized influence to someone who wants to stand up and oppose something critical. So this is something where the White House isn't trying to indicate any panic or worry, but it does just make that breathing room a little tighter.
Monica, it is now in hindsight, looks like it was quite a little bit of of putting her on notice by the White House when President Biden gave Ruben Gallego a lift to Arizona on Air Force One. Was that an intentional decision by the White House at the time, or sort of an accident that now may look intentional to Senator Sinema?
And we love this stuff, right? You and our friends at First Read. The Air Force One manifest, tea leaf reading is really an interesting one. It can tell you a lot. And when we saw the rest of the Arizona Democratic delegation on board heading to that event in Phoenix, with the exception of Senator Sinema, it did raise some eyebrows. And actually, the president called her out in his remarks there, saying that she was doing important work on the defense bill back in Washington, and that's why she couldn't be there. But of course, you mentioned Congressman Gallego, someone who could very likely be that nominee for Democrats in Arizona. I think he took more notice maybe than anyone else.
Fair enough. Monica Alba at the White House for us. Monica, thank you. For what it's worth, we invited many elected Democrats from Washington and the state of Arizona to come on to discuss this. Every single one of them declined or said they were unavailable, except for one. And it's the vice chair of the Arizona Democratic Party, Michael Slugacki. So, Mr. Slugacki, I really appreciate you saying yes. I know there's sometimes in sort of high, intense situations, perhaps some people think, I don't want to talk today. I appreciate you doing that. So, look, I know you're not happy about this. Is this irreconcilable?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on here. Happy to talk. I do think this is irreconcilable. I think this is the final straw for a lot of Democrats in Arizona. We've seen her continually shift to the right over the last few years, and I think this is the final step. People have been very, very frustrated with her for a long time, and I think this is the final step that people are just done with her now.
You know, I understand the perception that she has moved to the right. But if you look at her voting record from outside of the state of Arizona or outside of Democratic politics, she looks like a conventional Democrat. Votes more with Joe Biden, for instance, than John Tester does.
Well, I think that's a different perspective from inside Arizona. Those that have been in Arizona politics for many years now have seen her shift from what she used to be back when she first ran for Congress, for who she was as a legislator. And it's a 180-degree split from the policies and personality that she had back in 2008. So it is a major shift from what we in Arizona have seen from her. And it does show, again, that this is a very selfish move, that she's doing this for herself and not for Arizonans or for the greater party or for the greater country. I think Arizonans seen that she's in it for herself right now, not for everyday Arizonans.
Now, she would argue, and you heard her argue, it's independents that are actually the largest party in the state of Arizona, those that don't affiliate with either party. There's certainly, the Democrats are third, however you want to do that list, right? Republicans, unaffiliated Democrats, or unaffiliated Republicans, Democrats. That would be her argument saying, hey, being a member of either party turns off independents. How would you respond to that?
I think there certainly are a lot of independents in the state. It's a third of the electorate. Nobody's changing that, but she's very unpopular with independents too. She's very unpopular, extremely unpopular with Democrats. She's very unpopular with Republicans. She does not have a good favorability rating among anybody. One of the biggest things that Senator Sinema used to push for was building coalitions and these constituency groups to come out. She's lost all of that. She has no constituency group in Arizona anymore. She has no coalition, no base of voters that are going to go out and knock on doors for her anymore. Every single person that knocked on a door for her in 2018 and walked in 100-degree weather for her to get Kyrsten Sinema, a Democrat, elected in Arizona, is shocked right now. They feel like she's totally turned her back on the people that got her into office. So she might have some support from independents, but she has no base. She has no coalition. She only has this personal interest in retaining her personal power in her Senate seat.
Do you think a divided Democratic Party ends up hurting the entire Democratic ticket in 2024?
Well, I think Arizona Democrats here are still united here. I think that's a big thing. Part of us. Arizona Democrats work hard. You know, nationally is a different thing, but Arizona Democrats are absolutely going to nominate and run a true Democrat in 2024. This isn't going to dissuade Democrats from electing one of their own who will support Democratic policies for the United States Senate in 2024. Just a month ago, we won major elections in Arizona. Right. We reelected Mark Kelly to a 6-year term. We flipped the governor's office. We won the attorney general's office, secretary of state. So Democrats are winning statewide in Arizona right now.
Would it be a mistake if President Biden ends up endorsing Senator Sinema's reelection in your view?
President Biden is going to do what President Biden can do. I can never speak for the president, of course. He is going to do what's best interest for his presidency and what he thinks if he runs for a second term.
Right.
I think if you talk to a lot of the voters here in Arizona, that they would see how frustrated
You would advise him not to do that? You're not telling him not to do that. It sounds like you would advise him not to do that.
I would advise him to hold off a bit and wait to see how things go. I mean, if she's going to run as an independent, why should he support a independent for a Democratic ticket? We're going to be nominating Democrats in 2024 on the Democratic ticket with a D next to their name on the ballot. Why should he support somebody who's running against a Democrat? I do think that the senator has helped a lot of legislation, passed a lot of legislation, but she's also prevented a significant amount of legislation from being passed by supporting the filibuster. She's prevented abortion rights, voting rights, all of these other laws from going to into effect because of her blockade and because of her stopping legislation in the United States Senate. All
right. Michael Slugacki, the vice chair of the Arizona Democratic Party, like I said, tried to get a lot of elected officials today, a lot of them keeping their powder dry. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the perspective there of rank-and-file Democrats.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Coming up, could Senator Sinema's independent streak become contagious if she's successful at winning re-election? My panel is next. Plus, the war on TikTok, why 6 Republican-led states have banned the popular social media app from state-owned devices. The risks versus the reality. That's also ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now.
Senator Sinema has always had an independent streak. I don't think I'm telling you anything that's a surprise. She has worked out agreements with Democrats and Republicans on everything from infrastructure to gun safety.
Welcome back. That was Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar on Kyrsten Sinema's decision to drop the Democratic label in the Senate. That reaction has been the norm among most establishment Democrats in Washington, outside of the state of Arizona, who still see her as a governing ally, while some progressives have much harsher things to say. Joined now by my panel, Leon Caldwell, Washington Post Live editor, Daily 202 co-author, former Democratic senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, former Republican National Committee Chair, Michael Steele, and political reporter and Sunday Square Off host of NBC's Phoenix affiliate, Bram Resnick. Bram, I'm glad you were vacationing here in Washington today.
Right?
So
I thought this is a big year for time for vacation.
You knew that, yeah. In
December.
Bram, you have been the center of the domestic political universe 2018, 2020, and now 2022, and now here we go again, 2024. Is this a smart move or not by Kyrsten Sinema?
This was an inevitable move. She's been going in this direction for at least the last decade, really, I believe, since she won her seat in Congress in 2012. You know, and it's been the chatter in Phoenix that she would do this at some point. We thought back in 2018, after she won the Senate, she would immediately declare that she was an independent. She didn't, but here we are today. And so when I saw the news, I thought, okay, yeah, it's finally happening. And someone, I think it was Sahil, described this as a divorce.
Is it a full-fledged divorce?
They've been living in separate homes for a long time, okay? Separate beds, whatever you want to call it. She has no relationship with the party. The party today, their statement was basically, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Right. That was the Arizona Democratic Party.
So is today a great day for the Arizona Republican Party for 2024?
Not yet. They have a lot of problems of their own. We are still not clear of the 2022 election. There still may be court cases, a contest of the gubernatorial race. That party is still in the thrall of Donald Trump and will likely remain that way. Look at our legislature. It is very Trumpian. So they're not past that yet. The Republican Party will name their new chair in the state come January. That's a big vote that will tell us a lot about where this party is going.
Heidi Heitkamp, you actually didn't serve with her. You guys crossed paths, right? You lost in 18. She won in 18. But you certainly are friendly with a lot of the Senate. You know, what is her reputation internally?
Actually, it's pretty good, Chuck, that she can get a deal done. You know, you talk to people who have watched the deals that were made over the last 2 years. She's been in the center of all of them. And anyone who thought that she was a rubber stamp for the caucus is wrong. But what's interesting is the statements coming out of Democratic senators, out of Chuck Schumer, have really been embracing her. Because when she left, she did not take away her vote from the committee structure. And so these committees will be majority Democratic
Did she wait until after the runoff, by the way? I mean, she did have some deference to the party.
I think this doesn't change anything that happens in Washington. Where this matters is in Arizona. She's less popular than either Biden or Trump in Arizona in every category. What she's got to figure out is, are there enough moderate Democrats and McCain Republicans to form a coalition that will return her to the United States Senate? And I think if I'm her and you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at a very nasty primary race, which I think she would have, I think she stepped out of that and dared the Democrats to put someone up against her to keep that seat.
And not just put someone up against her. Now the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer, has a choice to make. Is the DSCC going to support her, or are they going to support the Democratic nominee?
By the way, in the same cycle that they have Angus King running for re-election, who does not run as a Democrat, who they help make sure the field gets cleared for all the time in Maine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no clarity on that yet. I mean, Kyrsten Sinema, when people make this decision, they have to think about the fundraising. Are they going to be a viable candidate not part of a political party apparatus? Kyrsten Sinema is a phenomenal fundraiser. She likes to fundraise. Everyone knows that she likes to talk to donors. But the question is she still going to have that national party to help her in the long run if she needs it? And we'll see what Chuck Schumer
Right now, fundraising is about small dollar donors. And she just now has abandoned small dollar donors across. And so she got to find enough money within the financial institutions to fund the campaign.
Michael Steele, you're a guy who's in a part of the Republican Party that the base doesn't like all the time.
Right.
And I could envision,
so popular.
You know, you ran for the Senate. Had you been in the Senate, in this Republican Party, I could picture you feeling as if you may have felt no choice but to abandon your party, stick as an independent. Like, if you're in the center of your party, I get this as a tempting path.
I get where she's coming from and how she got to where she is. Over the last 10 years, to your point, she couldn't figure out how to become a McCain Republican.
Or a McCain Democrat.
Or McCain Democrat. Yeah. But also a McCain Republican, meaning to make that move wholesale into the Republican Party. As she looked and saw the MAGA wings begin to unfurl, where does she go? Where does she fit into that? So now, to both your points, her strategy has got to be, how do I make this work, this independent posture work. She's got some examples. King, she's got what we just saw.
Evan McMullen.
We saw what we saw in Alaska, quite frankly. Even
Murkowski's basically barely, she didn't win with Republicans.
Right, she didn't win with Republicans.
She had the support of the party behind her.
But she was
she had Final Four voting.
But that's this election. The one before she was on her own. So
all right.
There are legs there.
But Bram, I want to get back to who is Kyrsten Sinema, because this little quote's been circulating from the Hartford Courant circa 2000, I believe this is in 2003, after Joe Lieberman lost a primary and then left his party. And she was protesting it. This is from the Hartford Courant. He's ashamed of Democrats, said Kyrsten Sinema, a social worker and organizer of the event. I don't even know why he's running. He seems to want to get Republicans voting for him. What kind of strategy is that? Now, that was Kyrsten Sinema, a much younger version, who was pretty much a more progressive activist. But you've watched this evolution in her over 20 years, arguably.
Yeah, that was a much, much younger version of Kyrsten Sinema. And all the things you're talking about, that polling, things that may or may not happen. I told you this, I think, 5 years ago. She's the shrewdest politician I've ever seen, certainly in Arizona.
You're not underestimating her,
and maybe even nationwide. She knows what the polling is. She's got the path mapped out. She can't be sure it's going to be the right path, but she's got it mapped out. This isn't like, oh, let's do this today. Right. This didn't just happen. As I said, it's an evolution. She's been moving in this direction. She knows what the numbers are. And now, to the larger point of, you have Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden in some really tough positions right now, kind of in a stare down with her and Ruben Gallego and whoever else might jump in.
Heidi, from my perspective, it certainly looks as if the Democratic Party apparatus had more patience for Joe Manchin whenever he had an issue than they did with Kyrsten Sinema. And it feels as if she took note of that. That whatever you want to think of this, and I know some said, well, he's West Virginia, that's hard, that she wasn't given the same deference. That it was sort of, there was a snarkier Snyder version of it.
I don't think that's fair. Number one, Joe kept going to caucus meetings. He kept taking the hits from the colleagues. He kept engaging. She said, I'm done. I'm not going to go to the caucus meeting. I'm not going to really engage.
It's the lack of engagement.
Right. And I think Joe was always willing to go into Chuck's office and have the debate with him, fight the fights. And at the end of the day, Joe delivered the deal that was the Inflation Reduction Act that a lot of people ran on. And so she's always taken more of a backseat. She's an inside player, incredibly shrewd legislator. And a lot of people who I trust, who are not partisans, who have watched this Senate, will tell you most of those deals would not have gotten done without her shrewd ability. And so I think people appreciate that, but she's never been an insider. And Joe's been part of the caucus a lot longer.
Leanne, I had somebody send me Hogan Sinema as the 2024 third way ticket.
Someone's tipping the eggnog early. Too much eggnog this early. Come on now.
I guess that's how she gets past the Arizona.
Right, and she doesn't have to run for election, right? Yeah.
No Labels has their own problems right now.
No Labels does,
no, I mean, that's fascinating. I think that, there's a couple of things here that, everyone I've talked to. So I was in Arizona in January when the party censored her. I talked to a lot of Democrats there. But it was hard to find Democrats who weren't really mad at her.
Goodness, it's amazing how angry they still are.
Yeah, so I called a bunch of people today, people in the state legislature, some Democratic pollsters, people I talked to back then, and they say that everyone agrees that there was just no path for her in the primary. And, she's saying that this is being a natural evolution.
She's the most electable Democrat that they could nominate.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly, in the general, but she just can't get past a primary. And so, maybe this is a natural evolution for her, but this is also very political. As you mentioned, she's very shrewd. She knows exactly what she's doing, and it comes down to her poll numbers.
What does Joe Biden do here? And Michael, I sit here.
He embraces it.
The best
he embraces it.
What's it?
Full-hearted.
Her or it?
Everything she represents, because the last thing Joe Biden can afford and Chuck Schumer can afford is to have her get ticked to the point. You talk about her not engaging with the caucus to the point where it's in her interest to saddle a little bit more to the right.
So, Bram, if he endorses her for re-election and basically tells the Democrats to stand down, what does that do for Biden's ability to carry the state?
That's the big question, right? And this kind of stare down that's going on, you are just going to depress the Democratic vote. right?
You really think you could?
Yes.
I mean,
I think
what happens when Carrie Lake announces her Senate candidacy?
Please, let's hold off on Carrie Lake 2024. We're not done with 2022 yet.
Well, we are, except she's not.
She's not.
I understand that, but that's my point here. You know, we don't, you know, politics
Sinema
isn't in a
could look
vacuum.
really good
Will
up
Sinema
against
suddenly
Carrie
look
Lake
good
candidate.
if it's Carrie Lake staring at the other side?
I don't know. I don't want to go there yet. You know,
But we do.
Still be my guest.
But the Republican opponent matters, right?
It will matter a lot.
Right.
That's the point.
It will matter
It's
a
going to
lot.
matter. What would John McCain think of this, Bram?
He'd admire her, you know what? Right?
Mm-hmm.
John McCain's language. He'd admire the heck out of her, but he was a pretty shrewd operator himself, and he'd really wonder how she got into this position. And this is interesting. You mentioned how she gets along well with her colleagues. She's always gotten along well with colleagues, especially colleagues on the opposite side, right? Oh, Andy Biggs, good friend of mine, which shocks Democrats, but she found a way in the state legislature to work with him.
I think she's Mitt Romney's best friend in the Democrats.
They have some ties there that are pretty significant. But she's also managed to alienate the grassroots, as we've heard. And frankly, a lot of friends of hers. This John McCain would not have done.
I have sensed this. Heidi, let's say she succeeds with this strategy. How many other senators that are what I would call soft partisans would be envious of that and say, boy, now I'd like to try that?
It's pretty lonely when you go out all alone on this kind of movement. And, you know, whether you want to agree or not, you read the Twitter feed, and it's brutal today.
Don't read the Twitter feed.
Yeah, no,
Twitter
I
is
know,
useless.
but you know, insiders here do.
Sure,
and all
they
of a
shouldn't,
sudden, and part of this is, I think, trying to find a path forward. I would not assume that she'll run. I mean, everybody is like, oh, she's going to run. And I think that right now she says, this is the only path forward. I'm going to take this step, take what's going to happen, and then I'll see
the
if I can
ultimate Garbo move.
Someone did say that this was a trial balloon on a potential re-election.
She'll want something bigger and better. And regarding Twitter, pay attention. She had a tweet last week where she criticized all the people who pose on Twitter. And she said, look at me, I get things done. It was a Twitter thread of 10 or 11 tweets, and it was, you know, get stuff done.
If you're doing Twitter, if you're still doing Twitter threads, you've got the problem. Leanne, Michael, and Bram, happy vacation. Thank you for working on it. Up next, we're going to go inside the government's national security concerns over TikTok, talk to a former FBI special agent, as more states are cracking down on its usage among government employees. That's next. But first, we have been excited to celebrate 75 years of Meet the Press with highlights and clips from the best archive in TV news. So given today's news on Capitol Hill, let's take a look back at 2001 when Senator Jim Jeffords left the Republican Party to caucus with the Democrats as an independent. The switch was enough to flip the balance of power for Democrats. Then Minority Leader and soon-to-be Majority Leader Tom Daschle spoke about the dramatic turn on Meet the Press in May 2001.
Why wouldn't the American people think that that was a form of a bribe? You come join us and we'll make you a chairman.
Well, that isn't how it happened. Senator Jeffords came to us and said, look, I've got some very serious concerns. Anybody who heard that speech this week, Tim, could not possibly believe that this had a lot more to do with his own convictions, with his relationship with the Republican Party.
And you think he'd vote with the Democrats to organize and make you majority leader if he wasn't going to become a committee chairman?
Absolutely. He made that decision first and foremost, and whatever his role will be in our caucus is something we'll decide later.
Welcome back. Among the stories that have actually fallen under the radar and shouldn't in these final weeks of 2022 is the situation at the southern border. The White House is expecting another surge of migrants because Title 42, which had been preventing migrants from claiming asylum due to COVID restrictions, is now going to expire on December 21st. Hard stop. No more courts intervening. So according to new reporting from my colleague Julia Ainsley, the Biden administration is asking for an additional $3 billion from Congress immediately to prepare for this potential surge. Whether they get that money is another question. A White House spokesperson tells NBC News Republicans should ensure DHS has the resources it needs to secure the border if they're actually serious about the issue. Of course, Republicans see this as an opportunity to make more of an issue on this. After the break, though, it's TikTok and national security concerns. My interview with former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts. That's next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. TikTok may be known for its dances and challenges, especially among teens, but an increasing number of governors now say that the popular app, which is owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance, could be a national security threat. And they aren't alone. Many national security officials are fearing this. States are simply reacting to the warnings. Yesterday, Oklahoma's governor banned TikTok on state devices. It's the sixth state to ban the app on government-owned devices, with 5 of those bans coming since last week. Indiana's attorney general is also suing TikTok, accusing it of deceiving users and exposing young users to inappropriate content. All of this comes 1 week to the day that FBI Director Christopher Wray raised his own national security concerns about the app during an event at the University of Michigan, warning that the Chinese government could use it to spy on users. I'm joined now by Clint Watts. He's an NBC News national security analyst. He's a distinguished fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute as well. And he's also a former FBI special agent and cybersecurity expert who's done quite a bit of work for TikTok in the past. But we should also note he does not speak for the company. He actually, in some ways, is a perfect guest for us to try to understand what is happening here and why there's such concern from so many governments about TikTok. So, Clint, I appreciate you doing this. So how would you describe TikTok's relationship with the Chinese government?
Yeah, I think it's unknown, Chuck. I think that's the key point of all of this is no one really understands what the relationship is with the government because things operate different in China. One thing to know about China, whether it's TikTok or any company that really operates there, is the relationship is tenuous at all times, especially if you're a foreign company. And there's always been questions about how much access the Chinese government has to data, telecommunications, and any information, banking information, whatever it might be, that passes through China. So I think that's really where the challenge comes in this, as opposed to the United States or European Union, which has very defined laws around data privacy, data security. In China, those do not apply. And I think that's why we continue to encounter this problem time and time again with all companies, namely TikTok, which is a Chinese company.
I was just going to say, and this is going to continue to be an issue as more Chinese companies become more global and have Western offshoots, particularly in the United States. So I'm curious, ByteDance, the parent company, has said they were going to try to create basically, to borrow a phrase, a Chinese firewall around its sort of non-Chinese for its U.S.-based business. Is that even possible in this day and age?
Yeah, so one of the things they did try and do and have already, I think, begun to implement, if it's not fully done, is moving data centers, essentially moving the data of customers that are not inside China to data centers that are in other countries. And so that would be parking a lot of U.S. data in the United States or in other countries. Singapore, for example, is a big place to have a data center, whether you're in banking or in terms of social media, because that's a country that has some sort of oversight. It's a place that many multinational corporations store data. I think the challenge just really becomes is the algorithm, and then what does the algorithm see, and how does it parse that data? You can't cut an algorithm in half. There's no way to put a wall through the middle of it, and to make the functionality work, it means it has to access data. The question I think that is the remaining gap is how much of that data gets through to China, and then how much does the Chinese government have access to it? Some reports suggest that they do have access to it or have made access to it. Others say that that's overblown. And then the other part I think that's really tough just in terms of regulation is what we've seen with U.S. companies as well. You know, is it the same? Is it comparative to what we see in terms of oversight and regulation with U.S. social media companies?
Considering all the warnings that many in the intelligence community has made about TikTok, what we've seen from folks that sit on the FCC, and what we're seeing with some states now that are banning at least government devices from using TikTok, I actually think, aren't government actors acting slowly, given all the warnings here? I mean, are you surprised there isn't a full-on ban of all government devices, at least, from accessing TikTok?
I think in terms of government devices, it would seem that we should already be in that place just because, look, U.S. government devices are oftentimes blocked from all sorts of applications and platforms out into the normal world. Essentially, you don't want penetrations from any location or any country. But I think the bigger question is where that data access goes and what does it tell whoever has access to that data about U.S. government or state government personnel. And why would they need to be on there? The one note that I would add to all of this is most of these controls, most of these reviews are done at the App Store level, meaning when we look at who would actually have the controls or levers to do that, that's Android, which is essentially Google in terms of their App Store. That's Apple in terms of their App Store. They do reviews of these applications. And so that seems like a more sensible place to really focus on where data controls and data access are in terms of bringing that up. They're going to be the ones that solve it. In the meantime, whether it's TikTok or any of these applications, that U.S. government personnel would have access to them in a way that was an open door to any sort of U.S. government personnel, their data, secrets, technology, whatever it might be. That seems like a bad idea across the board.
How comfortable are you putting your personal data and your giving access to your personal data on TikTok?
I have TikTok on my phone, and, I've used it in the past. Mostly for me, I work in social media and social media research. It's really hard to understand what's going on out there if you're not looking. At the same point, I think all of us, in the United States, whether it's TikTok, we were just talking about the same issue with Facebook just a few years ago in terms of Cambridge Analytica. Twitter right now is going through a lot of changes in terms of how they police information and data controls. It's probably a good time for the United States after about 6 years of discussion about it to figure out what are the controls that we're comfortable with, what's the oversight and regulation. And when you look to the EU, they've made a lot of those steps. They've really been the ones to implement things that have been more in terms of regulation and control that's consistent across all applications and platforms.
No, I feel like the EU cares more about our privacy right now than the federal government does here. I guess the final question I'd have for you is this, Clint. For all the concern about all of the exposure that the Chinese government might have to the private data of American citizens, hasn't China already vacuumed all that up? I mean, is the toothpaste already out of the tube?
Yeah, one thing that's been consistent across the board over the last decade in terms of China and its cyber actions is what it's been doing in terms of hacking in a broad scale and large swaths of data. So while TikTok is one aspect of this, we're getting to the bottom of it because all Americans are concerned because so many Americans use TikTok. Just look over the last decade and even back into the mid-2000s, the number of large-scale breaches that have been attributed to China. I think this is one of many of those points, those data points that are out there where Americans have to be asking, how much of my data is held in a foreign country? And in this case, a foreign country where the nation state and the business sector are one and the same. Essentially, there's unity between the two.
Yeah, to me, it's the ability to change the algorithm and change what you see or hear is more of a danger at this point, perhaps, than the data itself. Anyway, Clint Watts, it's always good to get your expertise and perspective. Thank you. And still to come, Ukrainian members of parliament have been bringing their message to Washington, meeting with U.S. lawmakers about continued support after 10 months of war. The chair of the parliament's anti-corruption committee joins me on set after the break. Stick with us. Welcome back. WNBA star Brittany Griner arrived in the United States early this morning after nearly 300 days in Russian detention. You can see her here. She's getting off the plane in San Antonio, Texas. She was at a military base there to get a physical exam. She was there just before 5 a.m. local time. It's Brooke Army Medical Center. It's a routine evaluation that anybody who's been overseas and in detention that long would go through. The Texas Medical Center has long been a place where the U.S. has had to take individuals who require potentially sensitive care. The U.S. Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs celebrated her return, tweeting this morning, "So happy to have Brittany back on U.S. soil. Welcome home, BG." Meanwhile, in Russia, President Putin spoke about the prisoner swap today, saying that Moscow remains open to future negotiations and exchanges with the United States. Those remarks come as the White House continues to face backlash for not securing the release of the other American detained in Russia, including Paul Whelan. The White House insists they will continue to work to secure his return and others to the United States. Turning now to the developments on the war in Ukraine. The White House is now saying, as first reported by NBC News, that Russia and Iran have developed a, quote, full-fledged defense partnership. According to the National Security Council's John Kirby, Iran is providing Russia with drones to use in the battlefield in Ukraine. And in exchange, Russia is now providing Iran with military equipment, including helicopters and air defense systems. As of this spring, Russia has reportedly been training Iranians on how to fly Russian-made fighter jets. Senior administration officials also told NBC News that Russia is looking to collaborate with Iran on weapons development, including possibly establishing a joint production line in Russia for the manufacturing of drones. And that brings me now to my guest that's on set, Ukrainian member of parliament, Anastasia Radina, who has been in Washington here, essentially, I would say, trying to reassure members of Congress and here in America that, hey, this money is going to good use. I appreciate you coming on. Let me first get your reaction to Iran and Russia in a full-fledged defense partnership. What does that mean, and how do you want others in the West to react to this?
Well, first of all, that basically means that Iran has entered the war with Ukraine. We are literally seeing this Iranian drones basically reaching into the home of each and every Ukrainian, disrupting energy infrastructure in the time when it is already sub-zero temperatures in Ukraine. So let me just tell you that my son, who is not even 3 years old, had to spend 5 hours in a row in the basement because of these Iranian drones. And now the issue of proper response to Russia is not only about Russia, it is also about Iran. It is also about deterring all other dictators out there from pursuing this kind of an aggressive policy. And this is also about not letting Russia dictate red lines, but instead for a civilized world to start dictating red lines to Russia and Iran.
Saudi Arabia and Israel have tried to stay neutral, right? I think some humanitarian effort. What would you like to see the Israeli government and the Saudi government do in response? Iran is their sworn enemy, both of those countries. Their sworn enemy. And here they are now helping the Russians, hand in hand. What would you like to see the Israelis and the Saudis do now?
We do think that with Israelis, we are natural allies. They know how it feels, and we know how it feels. So we are engaging with Israelis and kindly asking them to start providing military assistance to Ukraine, to start providing air defense systems to Ukraine. Air defense systems are #1 priority right now. This is what we have been discussing on the Hill. Not only systems like NASAMS, but also jets, because jets are not an offensive weapon for us. This is defensive weapon. We actually have to put our jets in the air in order to try to chase and hit Iranian drones before they hit our families and our kids.
Right. You've been here in Washington. As you know, the political party is going to change in the House of Representatives. There's been some Republicans who have said, hey, no more blank checks for Ukraine. Some would argue there's never been a blank check.
There's never been a blank check.
It's always come with conditions. What have you been trying to do to reassure some lawmakers that, hey, your money's not being wasted?
First, I'm chairing anti-corruption committee in Ukrainian parliament, so accountability is what I do, and I strongly believe in that. And we very much share the commitment to accountability, and we as Ukrainian parliament have been proactive in ensuring accountability is there. This is why we have established Special Parliamentary Oversight Commission back in summer. So we have been working for a few months by now to see how weapons delivered to Ukraine from our partners are being tracked, how they are being monitored, and how accountability is being ensured. Let me tell you two things. First, we found 0 cases of fraud or misuse of our weaponry provided by partners. Second, we have talked to all military attachés of NATO countries positioned in Ukraine and found they have no serious concerns either. So we also made sure that there are policies, systems, and mechanisms in place to track weaponry and to ensure accountability is there. These mechanisms are in place. For example, we have introduced LogFast, which is NATO system, in order to monitor and trace weaponry. It is there, already working, but we are continuing to work on proper policies to ensure everything is managed in the right way.
The Brittany Griner negotiation, the fact that there was negotiations and a resolution was done. The grain deal is something. There is ability to negotiate with Russia. What does that tell you?
There's no opportunity to negotiate with Russia. Now, here is one important thing. The war did not start, the war Russia waged against Ukraine did not start on February 24 this year. It actually started in 2014. And in 2015, we were forced to negotiate with Russia and to make a deal which was no good for us. But we were told this would bring peace. Surprise, this did not bring peace. This only gave Russia an opportunity to trade with the West, accumulate money, and hit us even harder. And this is now our obligation to secure Ukrainian victory. Now, to return Ukrainian
So no negotiation
now,
until they're out of everything, including...
We're not seeing Russia ready to negotiate. We're seeing Russia lie. We're seeing Russia blackmail. We're seeing Russia intensifying. We're seeing basically Russia becoming more aggressive. We're seeing Russia escalating.
Anastasia Radina, member of parliament from Ukraine. Thanks for coming here. Be safe and as safe as you can. And we all look forward to the end of this war.
Thank you
for your victory. Thank you all for being with us this hour. We'll be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. I'll have an exclusive interview with Senator John Tester, Democrat from Montana, and former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. Catch it on your local NBC News station. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.